Hi guys, today we're going to talk about type 1, type 2 errors, and I'm going to talk about this through the use of a story again. I want you to imagine that you are a business owner and you're wanting to open a high-end restaurant in a neighborhood, okay? But in order to open a high-end restaurant, you need to make sure that that neighborhood, they have pretty good salaries in that neighborhood, because if you're going to open a high-end restaurant, you need to have families or people in the area that are willing to spend money on an expensive meal. Okay, so it's not worth your time to open it up. So you have to do some research first, okay? So the null hypothesis would be the mu is equal to 150,000, okay? Or less than, I guess. You're just gonna assume right now it's 150,000. You need people in that neighborhood to make over 150,000 on average in order to open up this high-end restaurant, because 150,000 is a very nice salary, but I don't know that, if you're charging, $100, I shouldn't say $100, you can tell I don't eat at fancy restaurants, but if you're buying, a $70 steak, and then you have to also buy a side of potatoes on that for $15, I don't know that people really are going to want to spend that money unless they're making a really high income, okay? Now, this is all a fake story that I'm making up, but we can still talk about it in regards to statistics. Okay, so mu is that true mean. What is a type 1 error in this situation? So a type 1 error would happen if I have a very low p-value, which means I'm going to reject the null hypothesis, and I'm going to have evidence that that true mean income of a neighborhood in the area, okay, is over 150,000. Now, with a type 1 error though is I was wrong. It's not over 150,000. Now, what's a consequence of that? Now, I just talked about I'm only going to open the restaurant if this is true. Okay. Well, I went through the whole process, right? I'm going to type this out for you so you can see it. Okay. I think it will help. Okay. So if I made a type 1 error, that means I rejected the null hypothesis and had evidence the true mean was greater than $150,000. But I was wrong, okay? What's a consequence of that? Now I'm opening up a restaurant that no one's coming to, okay? And I shouldn't say no one's going to come to, but maybe not as many. So I'm not going to make as much money as I normally would. Okay, so you can add that on as well. Okay, a type 2 error. Remember, type 2, okay? So a type 2 error, and again, I would write this down. Now, I know I asked some of you to print out the sheet. I need to note that there is an error here. You need to cross this off and put HO. It's where we failed to reject the null hypothesis. So a type 2 error means I fail to reject the null hypothesis and have no evidence, the neighborhood, the true mean, is over 150,000. Okay? What is a consequence of that? Well, now I'm not opening up the restaurant, and I should have. I'm losing out, okay? A consequence of this, I'm losing out on potential profits. Okay. All right. So that's a type 1 error. That's a type 2. Now, what is a power? A power is where I am going to reject the null hypothesis, have evidence that the true mean income in the neighborhood is over $150,000, and I was right. Okay. So that's perfect. Now, I could foresee, I definitely think you're going to get a question on this. I don't know typically what I've seen is you go through a process. So you go through a significance test, and then what they do is they ask what could have happened. Could it have been a type 1 error, or could it have been a type 2 error? Okay, so this is really, I think, a more higher order question than just asking what a type 1 error and a type 2 error is. Because if they ask you what type of error could have happened, you have to think about what decision I made. So if you made the decision to reject the null hypothesis, a type 1 error could have happened. So then you would talk about that type 1 error. And I'm talking now on this AP exam for the year 2020, remember you're only having 2 questions. So I'm trying to envision how this is all going to flow together. And I don't know if I'm right. No one knows, right? Okay, so I'm envisioning you maybe are doing a test and then they're going to have some follow-up questions like interpret the p-value. Or they may say, what type of error could have happened, right? And so then, like I said, you go back and you say, well, what decision did I make? Go back to that problem, go back to that part of the problem where you either rejected or you failed to reject, right? And so if you rejected the null hypothesis, you could have made a type 1 error. If you failed to reject, you could have made a type 2 error, okay? And so just making sure you explain what it is and you say it in context. Now, if they ask you about the power, that's the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis and having evidence for HA, okay? And then you were right. So if you're not gonna have to necessarily compute the power, although I'll talk about how you do that. But I could foresee them having you interpret the power. So if they tell you the power is 0.82, you just say there's an 82% of chance of rejecting the null hypothesis, which means, let me rewind. There's an 82% chance of rejecting the null hypothesis, finding evidence for the alternative hypothesis, and being correct. Okay, I was right. I did it right. How do we increase power? We increase power by increasing our alpha and increasing our sample size. What does that mean? Let me talk about that right now. Okay, so we have a type 1 error, right? Well, how do I know what's the probability of a type 1 error? Like, how do I know what are the chances that this could happen? That's alpha, you guys. That's your significance level. Okay. Now a type 2 error, I'm actually going to write it over here for a specific reason. And so forgive me real quick. I'm going to move this over. Type 2 error is equal to beta. Okay. And what does beta look like? Beta looks like this. And then power. Power is, again, like I said, so type 1 error, we reject the null hypothesis, have evidence for HA, we shouldn't have. The chances of this happening is alpha. Type 2 error, okay, just in case I lost you, type 2 error is where we fail to reject the null hypothesis. We have no evidence for HA and we were wrong. The chances of this happening is equal to beta. They would give you the value. You will not have to compute beta, okay? Power, what is power? That is where we reject the null hypothesis, have evidence for HA, and we were right, okay? What are the chances of this happening? The chances of this happening is 1 minus beta. Hopefully I was a little bit clearer here. Now, how do I increase the power? I talked about it at the last slide. We increase alpha. Why do we increase alpha? Because these have a direct relationship, okay? We also need to increase the sample size. Now, how are type 1 errors and type 2 errors related? They are inversely related. So if I increase my alpha, okay, I actually decrease my probability of a type 2 error happening, okay? Again, inverse relationship. So if I increase my alpha, so if I make my alpha value now 0.10 instead of 0.05, I've increased my power and I've decreased my type 2 errors. That is all you need to know for the AP Stats exam, okay? Don't read too much into it. Don't think too much about it. Just make sure that you have the definitions down, okay? You can talk about it in context. You know how to increase the power, okay? And you know that the type 1 error and the type 2 error have an inverse relationship, meaning if one goes up, the other goes down. All right, you guys. Any other questions you have, you can write them down. I'm guessing some people are going to think bigger on this. That's for the actual researchers to figure out, like, what's more important. So they go through those tests and they think, what's the most important to us? What has a bigger consequence? Would a type 1 error have a bigger consequence? Or would a type 2 error have a bigger consequence? Okay, and so they go through and they compute all that. You don't have to do that. You're not going to have to do that. So don't worry about that. Okay, we are coming up. Oh, I'm a little over 10. Shoot. Okay. Fun fact about my son Anders. His best friend was born on the same exact day as him in the same hospital. Isn't that crazy? You guys have a great day. Miss you lots.